Hi, guys. Welcome to the chat. Hopefully, I'm not on mute or there's no technical difficulties. So hopefully, I don't see any of you saying that you can't hear me, so maybe we're good. I really hope so. Today has been one of those days, and I have a severe migraine. But we're gonna get through this. I couldn't let you guys down this weekend. I want to go back and just say hello and welcome some of you. A lot of you are thrown off by my time because instead of 6 o'clock, I had to quickly move it to 6:30. I needed a couple of minutes. Let me do one thing, guys. Give me 1 second. I want to make sure that I go live on Instagram. Um, Give me 1 second, okay, guys? I have to plug some things in. Then I can acknowledge all of you who are signing on. Here we go. Copy. You'd be surprised as to how many things I have to do behind the scenes just to get set up for YouTube. Okay, remove. I don't know what I'm doing. I hope I'm not messing something up. Let me just make sure that I am not. I'm going to say remove this one. We're going to remove Instagram, and I'm going to have to set it right back up. Okay, I think we're good. And I think we're good on Instagram. Okay. All right, guys. So I want to welcome you guys to the live chat. I do see some of you continuing to sign in. Whoops, what did I do wrong there? Yep, you guys are signing on one person at a time. Let me plug this back into Instagram. Something went wrong. And then we'll go ahead and jump in. We'll get started. And then I can acknowledge you because I don't like starting on YouTube without acknowledging you guys. Bear with me. Okay, we got it, I think. Okay, all right, let's start with Elizabeth. Hello, welcome to the chat. So glad to see you, and it's good to see you as well. Thank you for that. I really appreciate that. That's so sweet. Live life, you did make it. I almost didn't make it to my own live chat. Welcome, glad to have you. So don't feel bad. I'm gonna put you guys up here on the screen. I'm sorry. Yanni Body TV, hello and happy Friday to you. Hope you're doing well. Glad to see you. Dawn One, hello and welcome. Glad to have you in tonight's live chat. Deb, hello and welcome. Glad to see you. Ronald Zion, so glad to see you. I think you said it might have been in the last live chat. You said I missed it. I didn't mean to miss the chat or didn't want to miss the chat. So glad to see you in the chat tonight. Welcome. Yes, I'm glad you did as well, Deb. Yes, I had to move the time. So that's why you didn't see me at 6:00 p.m. C. Wallace, I hope I'm saying that correctly. Hello and welcome. Hello from Scotland. Thank you so much. I appreciate that for the tips on migraines. I just had a handful of chocolate almonds. I hope that has the same value. We'll see. I'm not as sensitive to this light over here, which is kind of giving you guys this bright scene that you see here. So maybe the almonds are working. I don't know. Scotland is a place I want to go before my time is up on Earth. So welcome. Glad to see you in tonight's live chat. The Retro Woman 80, hello and welcome. Glad to see you as well tonight. Yeah. Okay. Thank you so much, Elizabeth. I appreciate you for that. Yes, slowly. It started last night and then it's been continuing all day, but it's a little less, per hour. So thank you for that. Okay, I want to comment on some of your comments, Deb. But I'm going to jump in since I had you guys waiting. I'll come back to your comments. Let me just give you like a brief introduction of what this topic is about. A lot of people are unaware of what is abbreviated RSD, and that's rejection sensitive or sensitivity dysphoria. A lot of people are unaware of what that is, and that's primarily because rejection sensitivity seems to be found online mainly under the heading of ADD, attention deficit disorder, or attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, ADHD. So a lot of people are unaware of what that is. And as a matter of fact, this week I had a client, and she says to me, she says, Tamara, I don't know why I'm so sensitive to rejection. I've been like this all my life. I know that there's this thing called rejection sensitivity, and I think it's me, but I don't know if it's me because I have another disorder that is an ADHD. And as I'm going to explain to you guys and show you guys in tonight's live chat, I had to explain to her it isn't just ADHD where you can experience rejection sensitivity or rejection sensitivity dysphoria. It's not just ADHD. It can actually be post-traumatic stress disorder. It could be complex PTSD. It could also be somebody that has family trauma or intergenerational trauma, has experienced childhood trauma or abuse and neglect. It can also be something that you experience if you've lived so many years being battered in a relationship with a partner or spouse. So rejection sensitivity dysphoria really transforms from a sensitivity of being rejected to a extreme sensitivity of being rejected to an extreme sensitivity that has led to a kind of dysphoria, which is kind of like a low mood, a depression, kind of like this foggy, nebulous space that you find yourself. And so rejection sensitivity dysphoria is something that can pull you in at any point of your life, depending on what it is that you're dealing with. And it doesn't just have to be ADHD. So I'm going to highlight that in tonight's live chat. The other thing that I want to clarify too, as we move along in tonight's live chat, is that um, an individual, I'll put it this way, an individual who has dealt with complex PTSD, childhood trauma, ADHD, abuse, neglect, all of those things, right? Anybody who has dealt with that has a predisposition, meaning that you are kind of predisposed to having this expectation of being rejected. And that can lead to rejection sensitive or sensitivity dysphoria. You could say it either way. So sometimes there is a predisposition depending on, genes and biology and environment, and the list goes on. So I'm going to highlight some of those things in tonight's live chat. The other thing that I want you guys to think about during this conversation is the idea of social neuroscience. A lot of you probably don't even know what that is, because for me, and I've been in the field for 15 years now, I had to like pause for a second. Social neuroscience, and I'm like, okay, I know what that is, but it took me a minute. Social neuroscience is the study of neural mechanisms that influences behavior, how the brain influences behavior, how the brain and other neurocircuits in the brain influence how we respond socially to the environment. That's really what social neuroscience is. And so when you're talking about rejection sensitivity or rejection sensitivity dysphoria, you're really talking about social neuroscience. You're saying there's something going on neurologically in my brain that makes me predisposed to or sensitive to the act of rejection, and I can't tolerate it. It's not like you are being rejected and you don't like it. Let's say this is something that you do have. It's not like you're being rejected and you don't like being rejected. Rejection sensitivity is a whole other thing. It's my brain is reacting to the act of being rejected, and it is impacting me in very, very intense and very problematic ways. It's causing for me a dysphoria. It's causing for me a depression. It's causing for me this internal sense of not belonging, and that supersedes the fear of people not liking me. This is intense, and it's a neurological component to whatever it is that I'm dealing with. Let's say, for example, you have complex PTSD or you have PTSD. We know that post-traumatic stress disorder makes you very hypervigilant. It makes you anxious at times, nervous. You have flashbacks, right? You may even have physiological responses to triggers. right? Your body starts shaking, you go into fight or flight mode, you start feeling, muscle spasms and uptight and tense. And so PTSD, I'm sorry guys, this has been a long day with a migraine. PTSD and complex PTSD, let's say for example that's something that you're dealing with. Rejection sensitivity dysphoria could also not only trigger PTSD or CPTSD, but it can underlie it, meaning it becomes the foundation to the PTSD, and it can make healing from PTSD very, very difficult. In fact, before we go to the chat box, let me just clarify, or maybe I should mention this first, then I'll clarify something I said earlier. There is some research, and this is what I love about psychology. We're constantly learning, we're constantly inventing new ways of understanding human behavior. And so some of our current research is looking at the dynamic between attachment, emotional attachment, and rejection sensitivity dysphoria. There's not a lot of therapists or neuroscientists who study social behavior who have looked at attachment and rejection sensitivity. But the little bit of research that we have suggests that you can have a very avoidant or anxious attachment and also develop rejection sensitivity dysphoria. And that's because I'll explain it a little bit later, but it's because of the avoidant and the anxious attachment making you very almost uncertain about relationships and about intimacy and connection with other people. And so, rejection sensitivity dysphoria, some research is suggesting that there's a connection between those two: avoidant and anxious attachment and rejection sensitivity dysphoria. It makes healing from attachment trauma really difficult as well. Okay. I want to go to the chat box and just see what you guys are saying. I see the chat box. You guys are starting to communicate a little bit more. And then we'll go ahead and jump in to the things that causes rejection sensitivity and why this may be so hard for you. Because I think, maybe you also think this as well, but I think there's a lot of people who think, why would you let rejection get you like that? Can't you get over rejection? Why can't you just mature and don't care about what other people think of you? And I think that's a very narrow view. A lot of people think that you can just get over rejection, and that's not the case when you have something like rejection sensitivity dysphoria. I'm going to be honest before we go to the chat box. I'm going to be honest and say I've only had maybe 2 clients in the 15 years of my clinical experience that has experienced rejection sensitivity dysphoria, because number one, it's not noticed clinically. A lot of clinicians diagnose depression or anxiety or something else that makes identifying rejection sensitivity very difficult. So that's one of the reasons. The other reason is it's really difficult to treat. You can treat it, but you also have to figure out what's that other thing that's making this rejection sensitivity so intense, right? An example of that would be like a borderline personality disorder. That could make rejection sensitivity that much more impactful, right? Because there is a fear of abandonment and there's stormy relationships in BPD. So if you have both BPD and rejection sensitivity dysphoria, clinicians are not going to know what to think. They're going to lean to the side of borderline personality because it's a little bit easier to identify. So those are basically the two reasons why I've only treated 2 individuals with this condition. Okay, let me go to the chat box, see what you guys are saying. So glad to see you guys signing in. I was trying to stall for time by explaining. I hope you didn't catch that. Giving you guys time to tune in. So, all right. So Josh Wayne, hello and welcome. So glad to see you in tonight's live chat. Says, please do an interview with Dr. Russell Barkley. Yeah. I'm considering it. Thank you for that. He is the most important man in the world as an ADHD expert. His position is unique on rejection sensitivity dysphoria. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for that. I will definitely, as a matter of fact, I'll take that down again because I will forget if I don't write this down. I've heard of Dr. Barkley, and somebody else asked me if I would do an interview or some kind of like I did with somebody else that I had on a couple weeks ago if I would do like a live chat where we're both chatting live about, our area of expertise. So somebody did mention Dr. Barkley. So I wrote it down. I definitely will. I will consider that. So thank you for that. Okay, looking at the next comment. Hello, Caroline. I hope I'm going to say this right. LaRonda, welcome to the chat. Glad to have you tonight. Says, I feel like I have this just based on the name of it. A lot of people do. A lot of people do. The name is interesting because number one, people refer to it as two things. One is rejection sensitivity dysphoria, and the other is rejection sensitive dysphoria. And interestingly, some people misinterpret what it means depending on which way we speak the terminology or which way we talk about it. But it really, rejection sensitivity dysphoria is an umbrella term to explain a variety of triggers, risk factors, symptoms, and behaviors that we see every single day in ourselves. What makes rejection sensitivity dysphoria interesting is everything is 100 times worse than it would be for most of us, right? I don't like rejection. You don't like rejection. A lot of people don't like to be disliked. We try to go along and get along with people, right? We don't want to be ousted. We don't want to be ostracized. We don't want to be harassed or bullied, right? We don't want to be disliked. That's just who we are as human beings at the core of who we are. But rejection sensitivity dysphoria is interesting because the individual feels those things, but they feel those things at a very, very heightened level. And it's not always an emotional thing, it's a neurological thing, it's a brain thing. There's something in the brain that's causing this sensitivity to rejection. So you probably are right, Caroline, that you do have some elements of this. I would not be surprised. Okay. I'm still looking, guys. Yes, see. Oh, Shay. Shay, I got it. I got it. I'm so sorry. I mispronounced your name at the beginning. Shay. Yes, absolutely. It is a work in progress. Yep. Once you realize that maybe this is something you have, then you can start working on it a little bit at a time. Dragon Man, Sass, and happy Easter to you as well. And welcome to the live chat. Glad to have you. Nancy R, welcome to the chat. Glad to have you tonight. Says social neuroscience. Yeah, yep. I try to drop some new terminology every live chat if you didn't notice. Sun and sunflowers, hello and welcome. Glad to have you in tonight's live chat. Jessica J, you're the queen of changing your thumbnail. I love it. Welcome to the chat. Glad to have you. Or maybe I should say your profile picture. Yeah. Nancy R says horrible anxiety and dissociation. Let me highlight too, and I'm glad you mentioned that, Nancy. Nancy R. Rejection sensitivity dysphoria is a condition that can also entail anxiety and dissociation, because once you experience that rejection that you so strongly don't want to ever experience, then your mind, your brain goes into a stage where you can have a panic attack, you can have a quote unquote breakdown emotionally. You can also go into a series of flashbacks of something that was horrific to you. And I'm going to make all of this fit and make sense for you in a little bit here. And then you can also dissociate, right? It's a trauma response. And a lot of people with rejection sensitivity dysphoria, if I can get it out, they experience dissociation at times, and especially when they are in a place where they are being rejected or they're experiencing that intense rejection that they don't want to experience. Because again, it's much worse than just I've been rejected. So thank you for saying that, Nancy R. I appreciate that. That's a good point. I think a lot of people dissociate and they don't realize that. Cindy Hughes, I hope I said that correctly. Probably not. I'm sorry. Says, what happens when you repeat yourself? Is that childhood abuse, not seen, heard, invisible? Not caring parents, not told rotten kids. We weren't bad parents, should have not had us 5 kids. They messed us up. Let me go back over that. So what happens when when you repeat yourself? I'm not sure I understand what you mean. Okay, for the sake of time, I'm going to ask that maybe somebody help me understand that, or maybe you reword that for me. Um, I'm not sure I'm understanding. I would love to answer that because it sounds like it's a good question in there. Please bring that back to me, and then I'm happy to read that. Betsy, welcome to the chat. So glad to have you tonight. Says, if you have been rejected by your family, does your subconscious make it harder to bond with other people? Yes, and yes, and yes. Thank you, Betsy, for that very well stated question. It does, because here's what happens, and I'm going to explain this neurological piece in a little bit here. The brain goes through a process of rejection as much as your heart does. Your brain, especially the emotional centers of the brain, the emotional center is the limbic system. That's a system that is connected to the amygdala. That's the system I always say is that almond-sized structure in the middle of your brain. So the amygdala, that's an emotional center, the limbic system, and then your memory system, the hippocampus, right, the hypothalamus, all of those areas. For those of you who are not aware of how the brain is kind of segregated or sectioned, this is all in one area of the brain: the amygdala, the limbic system, the hypothalamus, the hippocampus. It's all in one system. Okay, or at least that's how I've been taught, and that's how I've seen it on MRI machines and functional MRIs. It's kind of like this section where all of these structures work together, and so people who have been rejected or strongly rejected, primarily from a close relationship like a guardian, a parent, a family, the brain ends up really rejecting that feeling of rejection, and so then your brain automatically becomes rejecting of any relationship that reminds it of that past rejection. The amygdala and the hippocampus work together on that. The amygdala, the almond-sized structure in the middle of the brain, is the emotional center where there's emotional memories. So let's say, for example, you have a very sociopathic dad. He's a liar, he's a cheat, he pathologically lies, he's manipulative, he doesn't care about anybody's feelings, their thoughts, he has no empathy, he's cold, he has put you and your family last, you're not important in his life. Let's say that makes up the character of your father. Let's say, for example, you guys get into a spat. You start telling him how much he's hurt you and your family and how much of a father that he isn't. He may say to you, you know what, get out of my life and don't ever call me again. I'm blocking your phone number. You're not allowed on my property. And if I see you on my property, I'm going to call the police and say it's trespassing. I don't ever want to see you again, right? Somewhere in your heart, that may really sting, right? In your brain, though, the amygdala says, you know what, I'm going to latch onto that, and I'm going to kind of integrate this into a memory. And so the emotional memory is going to be that my father completely ousted me, rejected me, hurt me, told me I was a nobody and to never come back around him ever again. The hippocampus, which kind of helps give our memories context, it helps tell us where we were when we had that experience. The hippocampus comes along and says, you know what, I'm going to make sure that you remember that this was on the phone with your dad on this day at this time on this holiday. And so all of those pieces together, Betsy, that's my long explanation to your wonderful question, that the brain begins to really integrate and almost submerge within itself that negative experience of rejection. Okay, I hope that made sense. I know that was a long explanation, but neurologically, this is important, right? Because it's not just I fear being rejected for people who have rejection sensitivity dysphoria. It's my brain is doing something, right? And that makes this 10 times worse, and it makes it very, very different to deal with than anything else, you know? Okay, so let me get into the content here. You may be wondering what causes rejection sensitivity dysphoria. Well, I'm going to just go through the list. I think some of you can kind of pull from your own experience and be able to say, this is what caused this. This is what has caused the dysphoria. But research suggests that childhood trauma causes it. Having a conditional parental relationship, with that parent. So having a almost like a conditional love relationship with your parents, right? I love you when you do A, B, and C for me. I love you when you make me look good. I love you when you give me this feeling, but there's no other love. So there's no unconditional love. Research suggests that rejection sensitivity dysphoria really kicks in for children and adolescents and adults when they have had or suffered under a very conditional relationship with a parent, a guardian, or a family member. So the love is conditional. Harsh discipline, research suggests, also causes rejection sensitivity dysphoria. ADHD and ADD is also something that be the can either, I'll put it this way, it can either, you can experience something from your parent that then seeps into your brain and causes ADHD later in life. So rejection sensitivity dysphoria, or being rejected repeatedly by your parent or guardian, can lead to ADHD. Okay. But a parent who has ADHD can also do some things to you that can really throw you off, right? They can be very impulsive. Sometimes, if the ADHD is a partner to a bipolar disorder or a partner to a depression, it can cause some issues within that parent child relationship. And that can cause rejection sensitivity dysphoria over time. Internalization of emotions, right? That can lead to rejection sensitivity dysphoria. Maybe you never got a chance to talk. Maybe you never got a chance to share your emotions growing up. You were always minimized and stonewalled and gaslighted and told you needed to be quiet, not share your thoughts, feelings, or anything. That can lead to rejection sensitivity dysphoria. What happens is these experiences leave an imprint. They leave an imprint on your heart, on your mind, and in your brain. And so as you develop over time, guys, as you develop over time, the brain begins to become really accustomed to how you see relationships, the fear that you have of being rejected. And so rejection sensitivity dysphoria can result from that as well. Interrupted bonds is another thing that can cause rejection sensitivity dysphoria. That means maybe you were bonded to your grandmother and your grandfather, but you were snatched away somehow. Maybe you bonded in a relationship with someone that you truly loved, but you had to break up or separate for some reason. Interrupted bonds can also lead to rejection sensitivity dysphoria because, again, those experiences leave an imprint and they impact how you engage in other relationships over time. Now, you may also be wondering, before I go to the comments section and see what you guys are saying and answer some questions, you may be wondering, why is this so hard, right? Why can't we just, kind of experience rejection and move on? Why does this have to be so painful? Why does it have to sting so much and last so long? I have had a client in the past. She had been seeing me for 5 years. The biggest issue for her was rejection. She couldn't get over it. It was something that just kept her stuck. And anytime she would even perceive rejection, it didn't have to be rejection. If she perceived that she was being rejected, that would lead to months, upon weeks, months, days, hours, minutes of just self-loathing. And she couldn't get out of it. And so one thing she asked me was, Tamara, why is this so hard for me? So you may be asking the same thing. There's a couple of things the research suggests and a couple of things that I have seen in treating people like this. One is that we are hardwired as human beings. We are hardwired at birth. We are hardwired to desire affection, love, closeness, and social connection. Hardwired. And there's a couple of research studies you may want to see. They're kind of interesting. I'll post some videos so you can see those videos on behaviorism. And behaviorism is really the study of how we behave. And there's been studies in the past that have shown that, we really, as human beings, we attach to anything that looks like it could give us love, give us affection. We attach to anything that makes us feel connected and interconnected. So we're hardwired. That's one of the most important things to keep in mind. It's not that you're weak, you're vulnerable. It's not that you're incapable. You may have heard those things. I know many of my clients have. It's not that. It's I'm hardwired as a human being to want and desire social connection, and I can't handle when I'm not connected. My brain does something when I'm socially disconnected, or I'm disconnected in my family, or disconnected from my spouse, right? The other issue here is there's there's this theory that ostracism, repeated social ostracism, or being segregated or pushed out or refused or denied can be reinforced by family members who are not good to you or your environment. Let me give you an example. Let's say, for example, you've grown up in a household where there has been nothing but trauma. You haven't had a close relationship with your parent. Your parent is very emotionally, detached from everything. You feel like you kind of raised yourself, right? And so maybe you didn't get along with peers, maybe you didn't do well in school. You've had this story, this narrative of being repeatedly and socially ostracized or dismissed. Any kind of situation that comes into your world after that can then reinforce to you that something's wrong with you. And that can cause rejection sensitivity dysphoria. Does that make sense, guys? That can cause rejection sensitivity dysphoria. I already have had these painful experiences growing up, and now something else has happened in my world. And what has it done? It's reinforced that I am the common denominator, that something is going on here, and I'm starting to blame myself. That can cause rejection sensitivity dysphoria. That's what makes this so difficult as well to deal with. It's reinforced by whatever may be going on in your life now, or something that's gone on in your life as an adult can reinforce your experiences from the past. I'm going to pause here. I'm going to take a breath and see what you guys are saying in the chat box. We'll get back into the content. I also want to tell you guys what happens to you and what may be happening to you, and then we'll wrap up after that. Okay, we've got tons of comments. Let's see here. Jessica J says, I've developed gastrointestinal issues from severe anxiety and stress from being around my narc mother-in-law. She is absolutely toxic. I never had these issues before her. I'm so sorry to hear that, Jessica J. Let me just give you some peace of mind that gastrointestinal issues is often the result of intense anxiety, and it wouldn't shock me if you're starting to get those symptoms just because you're dealing with your mother-in-law. It does not shock me at all. There's a huge relationship between mind and body, right? And there's an even bigger relationship between the brain and the gastrointestinal tract. Even if, excuse me, even if you're being put into a functional MRI. Do you guys remember what a functional MRI is? I think we talked about it a couple weeks ago. It's an MRI machine, magnetic resonance imaging, but the F at the beginning is functional, meaning that we can actually see what's going on in your brain as you're thinking certain things or you're talking about certain things. We can see on the screen different parts of the brain light up. It's so cool. It's like different areas of your brain are being activated by the conversation you're having as you're getting a brain scan. And so we can look at brain scans as we talk about anxiety and stress and rejection and sensitivity to being rejected. We can look on those brain scans and we can see different parts of the brain lining up. And it typically tends to be the emotional centers of the brain, according to some research studies that I've seen. So, Jessica, it doesn't shock me. It doesn't shock me at all. There's a huge relationship between the brain and the body. So, yeah, yeah. The best thing to do is disengage as much as you can, if you can. Ronald Zion says sometimes social media can heighten rejection sensitivity. Yes, it can. Thank you so much for saying that. Yes, because imagine what you feel like, or maybe you can go back to what you experienced even a couple hours ago. You go on Instagram, right? You go on Instagram, you scroll down somebody's page. Oh my God, look like they went to California. Now it looks like they went to Hawaii. Oh, look at them with their family. They're all smiling. Every photo is smiling. Every photo is, or let's say you go on YouTube and you watch a few videos about weight loss or getting fit or whatever. You can even watch the news and it can really stir up rejection sensitivity. Rejection sensitivity also tends to be a cultural concept as well. And not for everybody, but just for certain people. It can really impact people who turn on the news and there's something going on in their culture. There's somebody that's representing, a specific culture. And, you look and you turn the news on and they're doing something and you're like, this doesn't make any sense. Like, why would you do that? Right. Or maybe you're looking at something and you say, well, there's racism happening again. There's discrimination. There's marginalization happening all over again. Rejection sensitivity can certainly set in. Thank you for that, Ronald Zion. I very much agree. Shay Wallace says, in my case, it was my mother and family of origin. They were my very first bullies from day zero. They kick you down, then accuse you of being overly sensitive for actually feeling it. Yeah, absolutely. To kind of box you in the corner of you're overly sensitive is not only to refuse to communicate about the real problem, but it's to invalidate you. And so the more a family invalidates you, the easier it is to develop rejection sensitivity dysphoria, because then you're going to take that experience and possibly cement that to your brain, your mind, your heart, and then the next relationship, you may find yourself really not being able to be present because you're afraid of that rejection. Or you may refuse to engage in any relationships in your life at all because of how your family has impacted you. So I'm very sorry you had to deal with that, Shay. I think we all can relate to that in some way. Yeah, Cindy Hughes is talking with Deb and everyone about anxiety, I think. I think so. Line Laronda says, my neurological panel is lit up like a Christmas tree on my 23rd, on my 23, and me and my raw data. Oh my goodness. I just had an MRI too, and I can kind of relate to that one. Deb says, serious embarrassment when you have rejection sensitivity and you're getting feedback from your thesis advisor and can't stop breaking into tears no matter how gently it was given. Yeah. Yes, I agree with that. Yeah, your rejection sensitivity may set in. Yep, with serious embarrassment, being told that you did something wrong, being told that you need to correct something, being told that maybe you didn't do as well as you thought. All of that can re-trigger rejection sensitivity. Absolutely. I'm sorry, Deb, if that happened to you, by the way. Okay. Live Life says, my parents rejected me my whole life, and I'm positive it contributed to anxious attachment as well as dissociative tendencies. It really distorted my sense of self, and I'm also a perfectionist. Yeah, absolutely. I'm very sorry to hear that, Live Life. It can really skew your perception of self, and it can prevent a healthy development of self as well. If you have felt rejected by your parents, quote unquote, your whole life, that just sets the stage for rejection sensitivity, and it can then slide into rejection sensitivity dysphoria, where you're constantly on guard and you're constantly trying to dodge any painful arrows that might be thrown at you, right? And so someone who has experienced that live life, like you, for example, and one of my other clients that I'm seeing, it's really hard to even open your mind and your heart to a therapist. It's even hard to open your mind and your heart to a romantic relationship, a friendship, even a boss sometimes, because you have never had a stable support system that made you feel accepted and loved and connected. And so it's almost like a lifelong trauma. I think that's what I'm trying to get to. It's like a lifelong trauma, and you have to just push through it and find healing on the other side. You may have to also do something I've talked about in the past. I'll probably bring it up again, which is reparent yourself, right? You haven't had the parents that you needed, so now that you're an adult, you can definitely reparent yourself, and there's many ways to do that. I'll post my last video on this topic of reparenting yourself in the description box so you can go back and check it out. Yanni Body TV, and then we're going to get back into the content, says, Tamara, although rejection digs deep into our insecurities and feels horrible, do you believe it ultimately makes us stronger as a person and able to better accept rejection in the future? Yes, I do. As long as, yes, I do. As long as the rejection sensitivity Sorry, guys. I'm trying to plug something in here. Yes, as long as the rejection sensitivity isn't getting in the way of progress, because sometimes being so sensitive to rejection or having a rejection sensitivity dysphoria can really cause you to build these walls where nothing's going to get in, even the positive side of the bad experience, but if you are open minded, if your heart is open, if you're open to growing and changing and learning, oh yeah. I mean, I've been rejected in my past. I've been rejected not directly, but I feel like I've been rejected in the past growing up indirectly, whether that was because I was a multiracial child, whether that was because I was closer with the guys growing up. They were all like big brothers rather than the girls. My family, extended family, did not like that my mother decided to homeschool me instead of continue to put me through the public school system. So that was kind of some rejection in many ways. So I've experienced that indirectly, and I think and I'm getting to your point here, I think it has built me over time. And so, a lot of you comment on the kind of therapist that I am, the kind of individual that I am, and that's why, because some of the experience of the rejection growing up has prompted me to do my best and maybe overshoot, if that makes sense. So yes, I think we can become stronger. We might not only become stronger, but we may become experts in our own lives just because of that rejection. So yes, that's my short answer. Yes. Cindy Hughes says, don't feel loved just to give to others. I tell people, no, now, taking care of me, being alone, healing in the present, love thyself. I'm royal in power. Absolutely. Absolutely. Yes. The more you say yes to you and no to others, the better that you're going to feel. I think there's a balance there, right? I better take my own advice. Okay, you guys have such awesome comments, and thank you for that, Yanni Body TV. That was a wonderful question. Thank you. I want to go back to your comments in a second. Let's go back to the content. We left off at repeated social ostracism as being why rejection sensitivity is so difficult, right? How many times can you continue to experience rejection before your brain and your body just says, you know what, I give up, right? So that's what makes healing from this so hard, and that's what makes this rejection sensitivity so difficult to bounce back from. The other thing too is there's some research that suggests that rejection sensitivity dysphoria can happen to you if you have complex PTSD or PTSD and you perceive that you have little to no social support. You perceive that you have little to no social support. That can not only re-trigger PTSD and complex PTSD, excuse me, but it can also create rejection sensitivity dysphoria. And that's because if you perceive that you have little to no social support, and everywhere you go, you're being blocked, right? You're blocked over here, you're blocked there, you're blocked there, then the brain, right, the neurology of who you are, the neurological piece of who you are as a human being kicks in, and your brain starts to cement that to memory. And it becomes an emotional memory. It becomes maybe a flashback for some of you. And then you carry that on. And so then it makes it very difficult to cope with rejection sensitivity dysphoria and bounce back from it. Again, perceived a low perception of social support, I'll put it that way, can really cause some issues, especially if you have PTSD and complex PTSD. You may also develop a negative appraisal. I'll put it that way. You can begin to develop a negative appraisal of all relationships. When you have rejection sensitivity dysphoria or you have rejection sensitivity, you can start to develop over time this negative appraisal of relationships. Every relationship is a potential hazard to you, right? It's just how it works. The brain, the amygdala, is constantly looking for threats in your environment. It has no ability to reason, no intelligence, no intellect. The amygdala is purely instinct, primitive, so to speak. And so when the amygdala perceives that there's danger, which would be rejection from family, friends, coworkers, whatever, romance partners, whatever, the brain senses there's rejection, then you develop a negative appraisal of every relationship because the amygdala, the brain says that's a threat. So that's a possibility as well. So, what is happening to you? You may be wondering, what is happening to me? Why do I feel like I may have or I do have rejection sensitivity dysphoria? Here's a few ideas. I think the most important thing to keep in mind with this is there may be more at play than just rejection sensitivity. We have research that suggests that there's a connection between rejection sensitivity and borderline personality disorder, avoidant personality disorder, depression, anxiety, and even suicidal thoughts and suicide attempts. There's also self harm that has also been connected to rejection sensitivity, bipolar disorder, post traumatic stress disorder, and unresolved trauma or complicated grief. I should also put that in there, or prolonged grief, I should say. All of those diagnoses, disorders have been connected to rejection sensitivity dysphoria. So that's number one. You may be asking, what's happening to me? The number one thing could be there's something else going on with you that has then made you vulnerable to rejection sensitivity or rejection, I should say. It's made you vulnerable to rejection. It's made you sensitive to rejection. Think about depression, right? Depression always has it always has an element of the criteria that can be really self-harming, right? Negative self-thought, negative self-talk. I'm sorry, guys. Negative self-talk, negative thoughts about yourself, low self-esteem, feeling guilty about things, feeling blamed. All of those feelings come from depression sometimes. And so if you're experiencing that, it then makes you vulnerable to rejection. See how that goes? So it's like one thing influenced the other. It's like what happened first, the chicken or the egg? And so that happens here. Borderline personality disorder is another disorder that can complicate things, right? Most individuals with borderline personality disorder fear abandonment. They also sometimes create issues in the relationship because of poor regulation of emotions or splitting or manipulation that nobody wants to be around them. So they're going to be rejected. So the diagnosis of BPD can definitely be attached to rejection sensitivity because there are things that happen in relationships with people with borderline personality that can lead to rejection in and of itself. So it makes you sensitive to rejection as well. So it's what came first, chicken or the egg. So that's the issue. That's one issue. The other thing is the reaction to rejection can be irreversible. I'll put it that way. Maybe your reaction to being rejected was so intense in your world, right? Maybe you shut down, you withdrew, you isolated, you became depressed. Maybe you even thought suicidal thoughts. Maybe you even thought nobody loves me. I'd be better off dead. I might as well just go somewhere and hide or die. Nobody cares about me. Maybe your reaction to that rejection was so intense that it's now become irreversible. Now you kind of live in a mindset that says that I'm going to be harmed, I'm going to be rejected, I'm going to be unloved, I'm going to be mistreated in some form or fashion, no matter the kind of relationship. It is just me, it's me, it's me. That kind of self-appraisal can really make rejection sensitivity a really strong hold in your life. I'll put it that way. A real stronghold in your life. Having dismissive or emotionally detached parents can also lead to rejection sensitivity. So let's say, for example, you had a very detached, narcissistic mom. Over the years, you've experienced what that entails, right? You've experienced the coldness, the emotional detachment, the immaturity from the parent, the low level of consideration of your thoughts and feelings, the no empathy. You've experienced all of that at the hands of your parent. Detached, dismissive, uninvolved, emotionally immature parents can cause rejection sensitivity dysphoria in your life. It can cause it, or they can cause it. Avoidant attachment and anxious attachment, there's been some research that suggests that both of those things can cause rejection sensitivity. You know, avoidant attachment says, I am really afraid to be intimate, in a sense where you get to know who I am. You get to learn about my mind. You get to learn about my heart. You get to hear about the things that are really personal to me. We have a connected, interconnected relationship. Avoidant attachment says that I don't want to do that because I'm going to be vulnerable. You know, it's almost like an automatic negative internal model of relationships that says, I better reject this because I don't want to get too personal with people. I'm afraid of intimacy. I'm afraid of being seen or being looked at. And so avoidant attachment has been connected, excuse me, to rejection sensitivity dysphoria. So has anxious attachment. It's kind of the same concept. Anxious attachment says, I'm going to be very hypervigilant in relationships because I'm so anxious of being hurt. I'm so anxious of people knowing who I am. So I'm going to be hyper vigilant. I'm going to be on top of things. I'm going to run this way because I don't want to deal with the fight or flight system. I don't want to have to deal with feeling like I'm in a battle or I have to protect myself, right? So there's almost like this anxious engagement in relationships, and that can cause rejection sensitivity dysphoria. Let me also say too, before I go back to the chat box, and then we're going to wrap up, that it's a cycle. It's a cycle. It's a cycle that is really hard for most people to navigate. You know, those of us who are empathic, loving, feeling human beings, we are already kind of vulnerable, right? Because we want to trust people. We're kind. We want to help sometimes. We want to, you know, offer some kind of help or support, right? When we hold the door open for somebody in a store, we're being kind. When we stop, you know, at a stop sign and we know it's our turn and we wait for somebody to go instead, we're being kind. When we say, hi, how are you? We're being kind. When we smile at someone, when we laugh with someone, right? So we're already kind of vulnerable because we put ourselves out there as human beings. So you may have experienced some rejection just being yourself, right? So we all kind of have that vulnerability. But what makes this really difficult is, let's say you've put yourself out there once, twice, three times, four times, maybe all your life you've put yourself out there and you have felt nothing but rejection, denial. There's been no love, there's been no approval of you. Then over time, all of that in your life almost becomes like a cycle. It's a cycle. You reject relationships. You don't want to deal with intimate relationships. You don't want to show who you really are. None of that, because you are afraid. You are afraid. And this has become like a cyclic part of your world, right? I reject people because I no longer want to be rejected. Rejection sensitivity dysphoria. Okay, I'm going to go back to the chat box, guys, see what you guys are saying, and then we're going to wrap up. This was a tough topic with the migraine. I'm going to be honest. I'm going to be honest. And guys, for those of you who I joked with a couple weeks ago, I said I had about 5 or 6 tea bags. I have one tonight. I have one tonight. So I guess you could call me normal tonight. I don't know. I don't know. I don't know what you would call me, but I at least have one tea bag instead of about 7, which is what I put in there. Okay, the retro woman 80. That's so sweet of you. Thank you. Says hugs to those who deal with this issue. Yep. I've known the uneasy feeling of being rejected, but not to this degree. Absolutely. Yes, that's so sweet of you. Thank you for that. Which is one of the reasons why I brought it to this channel. You know, we talk about a lot on this channel, right, guys? I was just looking the other day, scrolling through, thinking, now what should be on my list next to add to my list of topics for 2024? And I'm like, we talk about a lot. A lot. And the last thing I want to do is leave out something that's so essential for most of us, and that's rejection sensitivity. It's important, right? It explains PTSD. It explains complex PTSD. It explains fear of attachment, secure attachment, fear of intimacy, fear of connecting with other people. It also explains why sometimes we build our walls and our defenses so high that nobody can get in, right? It also helps us see that it's not just people with ADHD that experience rejection sensitivity. It's everybody in the world just about. And it becomes a dysphoria when it becomes 100 times worse, right, for me than it does for you. So that's what makes it a condition. It's really bad for some people. Poppy 44. Hello and welcome. I didn't say that right. Poppy444, or maybe I did say it right. I don't know. Welcome to the chat. So glad to have you. Says, what's good, people? My brother talks like that, my older brother. I never know how to respond to that. I'm like, okay, I'm fine. How are you? I'm not hip. I'm just not. I can't. I'm just not. Nancy R says, I believe being my family's scapegoat was a form of them rejecting me. Absolutely. Being a family scapegoat is definitely rejection, right? It's saying that you're the problem, you're the issue, you're over there, you're the problem. When really the reality is that we all have some issues in this family, but we're just going to say it's you. And we're gonna put you over there in the black sheep role, and we're gonna talk about you, gossip, call you different names, and may even shrink the family group system to where you don't feel included anymore. It definitely is a form of rejection for sure. Deb, that is so cute. She says, holla. Something my younger brother says all the time. Holla. Amy, I think it's Amy. Bruno, hello and welcome to the chat. I apologize if it wasn't correct. Glad to have you tonight. Says a person feels the need to repeat himself various times to feel heard. Sometimes that can also trigger a rejection sensitivity. Absolutely. Why do I have to constantly keep repeating myself? I had a child years ago. He was 10 years old at the time. He's probably like 30 now, but he was 10 years old at the time, and he was so intuitive to be so young. I love kids like that because they're quiet and they sit back and they observe, and then when it's time for them to talk, they just come out with all this deep knowledge about themselves and other people. And so he was one of those really insightful kids. I could have sworn he was on the autism spectrum at the higher end. And he was really intuitive and mature. And he says to me, he says, Miss Tamara, I get really tired. I get really tired of trying to communicate with my family, and I do it in different ways. He says, I try to do it indirectly and I try to do it directly. I try to beat around the bush, and then I try to be very direct, and still I'm not heard. And when he came to see me when he went off to college, because he was with me from age 10 to 15 and then off and on until college, he was such a great kid. When he went off to college, he realized that he had been suffering from rejection sensitivity, not the dysphoria, but just the sensitivity to being rejected. And he connected the dots that I had to repeat myself so many times. This is to your point, Amy. I've had to repeat myself so many times in my life and in my family to be heard, that now I'm sensitive to rejection. So yes, a person feels the need to repeat himself various times to feel heard. That can trigger rejection sensitivity. Absolutely. Jessica J says, my narc mom-in-law on the day of my wedding told my husband that he didn't have to marry me. This the beginning of being not accepted, the outsider. Yeah, absolutely. Yep. That was the beginning of being the outsider. Absolutely. Gary H, hello and welcome. I'm glad to see you. New face. Says evening. I tend to repeat myself as well here. Yeah, absolutely. Me too. Kat Sushi, hello and welcome. Glad to see you tonight. Says happy Friday, everyone. And Miss Tamara, hello. All right, we're gonna sign off in a little bit. Just making sure I get everyone. Hello, Raymond Vincent Garcia Jr. Welcome to the chat. Glad to have you as well. Okay, I'm just searching for comments, making sure I didn't miss anything. NW, I saw you a couple messages ago. I'm coming to you, okay? NW says, what are some ways this can mess up women, causing them to be vulnerable to getting played? A parent constantly rejecting and finding ways to destroy their own. Yeah, absolutely. That's a fantastic question. Thank you for that. Okay, so let me read the first part again. What are some ways this can mess up women, causing them to be vulnerable to getting played? Yeah, absolutely. So here's what happens. You've been rejected by your mom, your dad, your family members, whatever, for so many years. That rejection hurts so much that you're willing to attach the moment you find somebody that you click with, you connect with, that seems to like you, that seems to get you, that seems to understand you. You latch on to them, right? Excuse me. You can also develop an avoidant or an anxious attachment as well. That's an issue. right? You anxiously attach in relationships, or you avoid them, you avoid intimacy. So that can happen as well. But what I've seen in my clinical practice over the years has been women who just they compromise, right? They do things like have affairs, and not only women but the men too. They have affairs. They're disregarding of the person they've committed to. They are fearful of connecting and attaching and marrying or whatever, committing to that relationship, that they date only women or women date only men who are temporary. That's another issue. So it becomes a big relational problem over time. Over time. That's a wonderful question. Let me also throw in here too, NW, that parents, becoming a parent, right? If you've been rejected all your life, especially starting in childhood, you can become a parent who then becomes either over involved with the child, so you become a helicopter parent, or you're very detached from the child. Again, you're anxiously attaching. You don't want to really be hurt again. So it can mess you up in a lot of ways. Okay, just looking for comments. Shay says, Tamara, my mom's favorite thing to tell me growing up was, just because I'm your mother doesn't mean I have to love you, or my love is conditional. She wasn't shy about it being behind closed doors. Yeah, oh my God, that's horrible. I'm so sorry you had to deal with that. It sounds like, if I can safely say, it sounds like your mom had some deep-seated issues that she needed to work on herself. Yeah, that's awful. An awful thing to say to a child. Raymond Vincent Garcia says, would rejection dysphoria to a child cause them to be diagnosed with mild intellectual disability? That's a fantastic question. I don't, oh, geez, I see my camera freezing. Ooh, I know you guys can hear me though. We were doing so good. We're on our way. I think my camera's getting warmed up. It's getting too much now. Raymond Vincent Garcia, that's a fantastic question. I don't know the research on that. I'm sorry. I'm happy to look it up though and post it in the description box so you can look at that research. And I'll try to bring it up next chat too if it's related to the chat. I have so many of you waiting on me for different things, so I'm sorry. Gary H says, I was often told that children should be seen and not heard, and speak when you are spoken to. Yeah. I think there's a place and a time for that, right? I've heard that too. Not growing up, my mom was way more emotionally intelligent, I think, but I have heard different people saying that. I don't agree with that. I think children should be heard. Children should be respected. They have a mind, they have a heart. They should be integrated when appropriate and necessary. That can definitely stir rejection dysphoria. Yeah, I'm going to just post this on the screen, Yanni Body TV, so everybody can see that. Yes, you're welcome, Nancy R. I'm so glad you got something from this. I hope everybody did too. This migraine, I'm like, what am I saying? In my own mind, I hear blah, 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 blah. Oh God, I think I need a nap. Andronicus, hello and welcome. Glad to have you. Excited to see you too. I haven't seen you in a little while here, it seems like. Yeah, yeah, that's awesome. I'm so glad you're getting something from them. That's wonderful. Tomorrow, I'm either going to do a video or a live chat, so stay tuned. I'll post it in the community section so you guys will know. Cat Sushi, before we sign off here, I'm going to scroll through, then call it a night. Cat Sushi says rejection sensitivity is very painful during your school years. Yes, it is, especially when you have a dysfunctional family at home. It just compounds the pain and the trauma. Yes, it does. Yes, it does. I have a child right now who's going through that. Divorce in the family, issues with a deceased grandmother, issues with the parent leaving out of the home because of the divorce. And then on top of that, they're being harassed and bullied in school and online. And it's like it's more than a double whammy for the kid. So you're right. I very much agree with that. Live Life agrees with you. Yeah. Yeah, Shay, you're right. Cortisol has a lot to do with rejection sensitivity, because once you start feeling that you are going to be rejected, because some of us can sense when it's coming, right? You can kind of sense when you're going to be rejected. Sometimes you can even sense that you're going to be rejected before you're rejected. Some of us are just that intuitive and socially astute. And so that can trigger high cortisol levels, right? Which causes the fight or flight system to be triggered. Yes, you're welcome, Jessica J. Much love to you too. Thank you for that. NW says, what if a parent love their kids but can't hug their kids but wants to, but it's mental? Yeah, I mean, that can definitely cause some issues. I don't know any research, but as a clinician, as a psychotherapist, I would think that would be an issue for sure. Raymond Vincent Garcia says, excuse me. And to add to my question, that was the question that he asked me a couple messages ago. He says, being diagnosed as an adult 3 years ago with mild ID, just finding out their family has lied to the person for years, will it make the person have extreme anger issues? It could. It could. With mild intellectual disability, if they can conceptualize what has been done and put pieces where it all makes sense, yes, I would think so. um that kind of thing. I'm not really sure on that research, or I would be able to say, yes, I know all about this. I don't want to give you the wrong information, so I'm going to post this information for you and your wife. I saw your comment here where you said the question is for my wife. She said, hi, Tamara. Hello. Hello. So sweet. I love, Raven, how you get on here. And I think for however long you've been following me, it's been a long time, and you're always participating in the chats, that you do this for your wife. It's so, so sweet. So sweet. I love it. That's awesome. You get on here looking for answers for her. I think that's beautiful. Okay. I have a husband that comes to me for psychotherapy. He does the same thing. He sits there with a notepad and a pen, and he's like, I'm just getting all these answers from my wife. So sweet. Phoenix, hello and welcome to the chat. So glad to have you. Yeah. What's up? Now here I am trying to be hip, and I know I can't do it. I'm just making sure I haven't missed anyone. Okay. Yeah. Nancy R says, happy Easter. Silent Walk, happy Easter to you too, Nancy. Silent Walker says, I'm late. Hey, Tamara and all. Yes, but that is okay. We're signing off. Happy Easter to you. I hope you have a wonderful weekend. Live life. Hello. And why am I saying hello? I said hello to you so many chats ago. I need to go with this migraine. Okay. It's throwing me off. Live life says, thank you for all you do. Yes, you're welcome. And thank you for always coming to the live chats. Most of you who come to my live chats, you guys are just wonderful. And the rest of you who communicate with me behind the scenes, you're wonderful also. So thank you so much for continual support. Let's go ahead and sign off. I hope to see you guys tomorrow, whether that's going to be a video or a live chat. We'll see. I hope you guys have a wonderful weekend if I don't show up tomorrow, and a wonderful Easter. I'll see you soon. Good night, guys.